Hi everybody, my name is Daniel Hartlauer, and today I'd like to talk to you about gender exclusion in sports and how policy has impacted that so far. So, looking at recent years, transgender athletic participation has received a lot more attention than it has in the past. As recent as 2020, Arizona policy HB 2706 passed. So, the House Bill 2706 basically says that they want to exclude transgender women from participating in women's sports on the basis that transgender women who are biologically male have inherent advantages that cisgender females do not have. This has been also referred to as the Save Women's Sports Act, which is cited in the bill. And this has been also adopted in a lot of other states. Arizona was not the first to do this. So historically, transgender individuals participating in sports isn't a new concept. It has been around for many years. One of the first notable cases was in 1977 with Renee Richards. So Renee Richards was an accomplished male tennis player who transitioned to female in 1975. So she wanted to participate in the Women's US Open, but she was initially declined because of her inherent advantages. So she was asked to take the Barr body test to look at her chromosomes and determine whether or not she was actually female, and she denied that. So she went to the Supreme Court, arguing that this was discriminatory towards her, and she actually won that case. And she was able to participate in the U.S. Open and was unfortunately eliminated in the first round. She would go on to retire 4 years later from tennis. In more recent years, the Olympics in 2003 and the International Olympic Committee, IOC, drew guidelines stating that transgender athletes, in order to qualify for the Olympics, had to have undergone gender reassignment surgery, including genitalia and a gonadectomy, show legal recognition of their gender, and have undergone hormone therapy for close to 2 years prior to participation. So trans athletes were not allowed to participate until 2004. So they had to meet all three of those requirements just to participate. This was actually amended in 2015 due to the recognition that gender reassignment surgery could be difficult in countries where gender transition is not legal. And so requiring surgery for otherwise healthy individuals may also violate human rights. New guidelines only require that trans athletes declare their gender and not change that distinction for a period of 4 years. So in addition to demonstrating that, they also must demonstrate a testosterone level of less than 10 nanomoles per liter for at least 1 year before competition. Female to male transgender athletes have no restrictions. So schools around the United States have a variety of policies in place to exclude transgender athletics, or at least place restrictions on their participation. So examples of these policies are birth certificate and hormone policies, and these would either require proof of biological sex at birth or proof that an individual is undergoing hormone treatment to keep testosterone levels low. So the perspective against inclusion for transgender athletes has really come up a lot lately. There's the belief that allowing transgender females to participate gives an unfair advantage to cisgender females. And in all of the research that I've done on this, that's pretty much the central argument for every single case. So there is some research that does suggest that biological males can have higher testosterone levels without hormone treatment, in addition to muscle mass and fat distribution. Even with testosterone suppression, no male to female transgender person has ever lost more than 12% of their muscle mass, with the average male having 40% more muscle mass, than biological females, transgender women will almost always have a perceived muscle mass advantage. The other concern that comes up is the belief that transgender women have a greater chance to cause injury to cisgender females in high contact sports like rugby or football. In fact, the World Rugby Transgender Working Group acknowledged that cisgender women, when tackled by a transgender female, were almost 20 to 30% more likely to sustain an injury when compared to being tackled by a cisgender female. And Arizona HB 2706 also adds that men generally have denser, stronger bones, tendons and ligaments, and larger hearts, greater lung volume per body mass, and a higher red blood cell count, and higher hemoglobin. So the perspective for inclusion of transgender participation is a lot more extensive. Most of the talking points against revolve around specific physiological advantages perceived. A lot of the research going for including transgender participation actually argues against a lot of those physiological advantages that's argued on the other side of the table. So research has shown that physiological equivalency arguments do not always hold up when you consider athletes typically have other skills needed to succeed or other genetic advantages. So, for example, Michael Phelps, one of the most renowned Olympic swimmers and won countless gold medals, he was double jointed and he also had a larger wingspan. He also has longer legs and larger feet than the average competitors in his class. So the question here is, should he have been expelled from competition for having genetic advantages that others did not? Additionally, some biological women, such as Caster Semenya, have naturally occurring higher levels of testosterone that have resulted in her being restricted from participating in track and field events, even though she is biologically female. Additionally, research has shown that while transgender women may have some advantages in height, and that would help in sports like basketball, they may have disadvantages in other sports such as gymnastics due to flexibility being more seen in cisgender females. So another point that I wanted to make here was that allowing transgender individuals to participate can reduce mental health concerns. Transgender individuals often struggle with body dysmorphia, self-esteem, social anxiety, discrimination, on top of eating disorders as well. Research has shown that athletics have been a positive experience for many trans athletes, especially when given social support from friends, coaches, teachers, and family. And the last point I wanted to make here is that it's not ethical and could be discriminatory to require transgender individuals to get hormone treatment, sex testing, or gender reassignment surgery. People as young as 8 to 10 years old have questioned their gender identity, and thousands more in their teens have identified as transgender. So research supports that forcing young people to get hormone treatment, sexual reassignment surgery, or any form of forced biological change is not in their best interest. Forcing someone to prove their gender is demeaning and could qualify for sex discrimination, as seen in the Renee Richards case from 1977. And one quote from an article that I was researching, I think really sums up the argument for inclusion, which is that concerns about testosterone will not make sports fair. When variations in size, strength, talent, and experience still operate to place some competitors at an advantage over others. Nor will her presence in the game automatically render it unfair, since it is equally possible that the other competitors have compensatory advantages of their own, like the basketball player who's taller than average, the swimmer with a massive wingspan, and the soccer player whose family could afford to send her to sports camp in the summer. Some questions to consider as we kind of wrap up this presentation is, who is harmed most by the inclusion or exclusion of transgender athletes? Whose mental health is impacted the most? Should there be different regulations for youth sports compared with adult sports, especially with the different developmental stages? Is it ethical to require children and youth to undergo hormone treatment? Is it ethical to require someone to have surgery in order to compete in sports? Are policies requiring gender testing, mandatory mandatory hormone treatments ethical? These are some questions that I would like to leave you with today to consider as this topic is still very largely debated amongst people in America and around the world. So I want to thank you for checking out my presentation. I hope this was helpful for some of you, and I hope that this will give you a lot to think about when considering the inclusion or exclusion of transgender people in sports. Thank you.